there is something called, is it rejection dysphoria associated with ADHD? What is that exactly? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I think all my clients probably can relate to that particular label. Basically, just
Yeah.
being very, very hypersensitive to rejection. And even I think projecting it onto people and places where it doesn't exist. It can really lead to a lot of people pleasing, which is part of this kind of,
Yes.
you know what, I think if we really look at the true neuroses that is ADHD, it's not ADHD. It's not that the brain is wrong and broken and needs to be fixed. It's that the neurosis is masking, right? That our world forces us to mask and to pretend to not be ourselves in order to live and survive in this society.
Hello, welcome back to Hypersensitive. Today we have a guest, a special guest, a wonderful friend of mine, Cammi Manchur. Hello, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chrissy.
So happy to have you. I'm going to do a little intro so the world knows who you are and what you do. Cammi Manchur is a psychotherapist and art therapist who specializes in working with people with ADHD, trauma, anxiety, and depression. She works from a psychodynamic perspective from a Jungian foundation.
Perfect. I think you got it all.
Yes, got it. Well, welcome. Today we're going to get into talking about ADHD therapy, perspectives from a therapist, but then also from people like myself who have ADHD, and we're going to get into it. So let's get started.
Sounds fabulous.
So, Cammi, how did you get into being a therapist? Like, what inspired you to do this work?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's a long story, so I'll give you the short. um,
Well, we have 60 minutes, so.
yeah, I actually used to work as a farrier, which is somebody who makes horseshoes and nails them on and trims horse feet. But I had a tragedy in my family and found myself in therapy with a psychoanalyst in Edmonton. And it was a really transformative experience. And after a while, I realized this is what I want to be able to facilitate for people, to help find meaning in what feels like at the time a meaningless world. So that really, once I realized, okay, I want to do this, that helped me finish my bachelor's degree and do my master's degree and get into this practice. In terms of ADHD, I never expected to work with it. I was diagnosed in my last year of my bachelor's degree of university, which was
Wow.
like a blessing and a curse. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
as everybody feels like, right? If I'd been diagnosed earlier. Um, but yeah, I really think that diagnosis really helped me get through that last year and even just applying for grad school. So after grad school, I really just wanted to work from a Jungian lens with everybody and anybody that kind of came into my studio. And I was working at Art for Change, which was like a really lovely group practice where I'd done my practicum. And it just so happened that a lot of my clients had that ADHD diagnosis or identified with it or connected to that label, rather. So I started to see a pattern here, and I hadn't disclosed that I connected to that label as well and had that diagnosis to anybody for a couple of years. It took me a while to feel comfortable enough to do so. I was worried about stigma and worried clients would,
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, she's never going to be on time and she's going to cancel
Yes.
everything." But once I did, my business exploded because, yeah, people seem to enjoy having a counselor or a psychotherapist who gets it as much as I can with my own personal experience and who has that lived experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can totally empathize and understand what that's like to have the stigma behind it. And I find that what's interesting is a lot of that comes from our own thoughts and feelings, because I find that people who may or may not, people who don't have ADHD probably have no idea what it is that you're struggling with, but they may or may not recognize that, oh, okay, well, if they knew, they'd be like, okay, well, maybe that's why they're late. But I find that it takes some explaining as to what ADHD is for the outside world to really understand what it is that you're struggling with.
Oh, absolutely. I so agree. And especially, when you and I were I guess, younger. You got diagnosed. What was your diagnosis story?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed when I think it was about 6 or 7,
Okay.
and the reason I got diagnosed was because the teachers thought that I talked too much.
Mm.
So it started out with me going to school, talking too much, not paying attention, and the teachers approached my parents and were like, "Hey, this kid is hyper, talks too much, she's out of control. We need to, you need to go figure that out. We think she has ADHD." And so I went to the doctor, got diagnosed with ADHD, and then in the 90s, they told our parents that you'd grow out of it by the time you were an adult.
Right.
And so I was put on medication early. I wasn't on Ritalin. I was actually on something called Clonidine, which was a high blood pressure medication. But they put it on, they gave it to children because it actually had a soothing effect.
Mm.
But what's really interesting is because it lowers your blood pressure, had a soothing effect. I would always fall asleep in school. So I'd have the teachers calling my parents and being like, okay, well, now she's falling asleep. So now she's not awake.
Ah,
So I had all kinds of issues with coming on and off medication. And I remember actually, it's kind of a sad moment, but I remember being a kid and telling my parents that the only reason you and my teachers have me on this medication is because you want me to shut up. You want me to
oh,
take this pill so that I can be quiet.
wow.
So that was when my parents were like, I don't even know if she has this. I don't know if she needs this. She's too young to be on medication. And I just stopped taking it. I was probably, gosh, maybe 7, 8. By the time I stopped taking it, 8 seems a little late, but it could have been as late as that age. And then I just went through the rest of my school, elementary, high school, without anything. I was just, just trying to make it through. And I did struggle, definitely. And I thought that there was something wrong with my brain or the way that I thought. And I thought for many years, I was like, I'm just not smart enough. I'm not
Mm.
going to go to university. University luckily wasn't my trajectory anyway. I had other interests as far as film and acting goes, but it still really hurt me that if I did want to go to university or if I did want to continue my education, I didn't feel like I could do it. And I just felt like I was not smart enough, not good enough, not able to complete the homework in time, not able to focus on my schoolwork and get the grades that I needed to be successful in life. So it really put a lot on me at that age.
Yeah.
And then once I started working in film, I went and got re-diagnosed. I was like, okay, well, I had met you and we started talking about your ADHD. And I was like, oh, I'm curious about that. You have ADHD like as an adult? And that's when I realized you don't grow out of it. We had a conversation. And so, yeah, I went and got diagnosed and he was like, yep. And so I decided to try medication, which I go back and forth on. I haven't found the perfect balance for me yet, but I'm just glad to know that, there's a place and space for me in the world as an
Mm.
adult and that there's options and that now there's so much more education about what it is. It's not just chalked up to you talk too much and you don't pay attention.
Yeah. I think, and I think what I was going to say before I asked you about your story was that there's still a lot of stigma, but it's talked about more. And we didn't have things like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, at least when we were kids. That wasn't a thing. Like the internet was just becoming a thing.
Yeah,
So that sharing of knowledge, whether it be factual or not, was not there. I mean, there's problems with that. Some of the knowledge isn't factual, but everybody
right.
knows what
Totally.
ADHD is now, it feels like even like my
Yeah.
grandma's, who's like saw a news article on this or that. And it's like, wow, okay, it is everywhere.
It is, yeah. And especially like in my echo chamber, because I look at a lot of different pages or TikToks about ADHD, which can be really great to find a community of people that can relate. And I find a lot of humor and a lot of relief and release in that. But there's also the fact that there could be misinformation coming from that too. And that can be problematic.
Oh, and there's so much misinformation. Yeah. So I always tell people if you're going to go on those, if you're going to watch those sites, take everything with a grain of salt, like those reels, I guess, or whatever you call the TikToks. Oh my God, I feel old.
Yeah.
Um, I do know what TikTok is. Um,
Yes.
and then do your own research after. So if you feel like, oh shit, like maybe I have ADHD, don't diagnose yourself from one TikTok video. Go and do some research. Look at some more maybe evidence based or lived experience even based um, studies or memoirs from people. Maybe not memoirs, autobiographies from people.
Yeah,
To help you
absolutely.
understand what it is that that label actually means.
Absolutely. Well, that leads me into a thought. Like, what do you think about folks who are self diagnosing? Do you think that that is a positive thing, or do you think that it takes away from folks that actually have been diagnosed and have it? What do you think about that? Could that be problematic?
If they're yes and no, like I think it's great from a neuro affirmative perspective. Like I think we shouldn't have to rely on the medical system to connect with labels. Labels are how we organize our world. Um, that being said, I think there's a difference between feeling like, oh, maybe I have this, and actually diagnosing. So doing your research, like I said, actually doing your research, doing a bunch of the pretty accurate online tests, you know, not just watching one TikTok video and deciding you have ADHD, but actually going out and doing the hard work of looking at your childhood, asking your parents those questions. You know, if you are going to self-diagnose, there needs to be some sort of accountability there. That self-diagnosis won't get you medication, unfortunately, but it might start you on a path of understanding, and maybe you can connect with people who have that same connection to the label of ADHD and see where that goes. But yeah, it's an interesting movement. You know, some people are just so against this self-diagnosis thing, and they're like,
Right.
everybody's getting diagnosed with ADHD. But
I know I've seen some TikToks on it.
when you act, yeah, and you know, yeah. When you actually look at the facts, at least for North America, it is incredibly hard to get a medical diagnosis, right? So the cost of if you don't have benefits, first of all, a psychologist assessment, like you're looking at anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. To get in to see a psychiatrist is
Wow.
similar, but if you are going through, you know, BC Health or Alberta Health, that's like a 2-year wait usually.
Yes.
Luckily, we have a couple of better systems now. Talk with Frida is one of them, where you can get an assessment for $300 from a nurse practitioner who works under a psychiatrist. That's an online assessment available in BC and Alberta, and I think Ontario. So it's getting there, but right now it's very hard. It's not easy to get an assessment.
No. No, definitely not. I know that when I wanted to get re-diagnosed, I think it was during COVID, so 2020-ish. Um, I initially had to wait, like when I was just doing the research on my own, there's not many folks here in Vancouver that will diagnose. And then because it's not like you can go to your GP, they don't specialize in that. So you have to find a psychologist, a psychotherapist, um, to go and diagnose, or psychologist or psychiatrist, sorry, to diagnose you. And I think I was on a wait list that was like 10 or 11 months long. Luckily, I ended up using I went another avenue and was able to get diagnosed with another psychiatrist that was like through like a telehealth, but that was relatively quick. However, you know, if you like to have the in-person experience and go and sit down with somebody, that may not be possible. So, yeah, it does take a while, unfortunately. And that's if you want to have that diagnosis and know for sure, and have the option of having, you know, a medication if that's something that you're interested in. And something that I learned too was that not all medication is a one size fits all. You might try one and find that you don't feel great on it, and it's a trial and error. The first medication that I was on, I didn't feel great with. Luckily, by the time I tried a second one, I found that really worked for me. So there's some work and some time to put into that. And I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't working on a big project because I knew that I may not be feeling completely myself as I'm testing and working with new medication. So I didn't know how I was going to react to that. So I needed time and I needed space to be able to experiment with that, which not everybody has time for.
I so appreciate that you were self-aware enough to know that, right? To say I need some space to play around with that just in case something maybe doesn't drive with my system. And I think if you have a good relationship with your doctor or your psychiatrist, they can be helpful in advocating for that too. But again, like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, good luck finding a doctor in BC, let alone one that is, going to be confident in your assessment of what you need. I had a wonderful doctor in Vancouver when I left. I'm in Alberta now, and she was just fabulous and really listened to what I had to say. But before her, when I first moved to Vancouver, I had a doctor who, when I said, I think I want to lower my dose of medication, actually, she said, well, yeah, why are you on these things? Like, they're for kids. Stimulants are for kids. It's like, oh,
Wow.
okay. I
Wow.
don't know if do I have enough time to educate you here?
Yeah. You're like, actually, oh, I don't know if I should be seeing you. Uh, yeah, we're not on the same page, which is really unfortunate and really frustrating too, because it's not just trying to get into a doctor that can help you. It's also somebody that aligns with how you want to live your life with this. I don't want to call it a disorder because for me, I don't feel like I'm out of order necessarily, but just with your brain functioning this way, with your brain functioning differently, you want to be on the same page with your doctor and how your treatment is going to take place and progress. So I did feel very fortunate that mine was encouraging about medication, but also said that it's a trial and error. You might not even want to continue taking medication. And there's other ways. He tested my vitamin B, vitamin D levels. We talked about different nutrients to take,
Fabulous.
exercise, getting outside, mindfulness, meditation, that type of stuff to help with the symptoms. He was an advocate for the approach that I wanted to take, and he was open to it. So you want to be on meds? Great. If you don't, great. It's your life, and take care of yourself in the best way you want to.
It's so fabulous. Trusting you to know what you need, having all of his medical expertise there to help you on that path. And I think that's so beautiful. And I want to make sure I'm really clear. I don't want to bash doctors. Doctors do a lot of work, and it's a hard job
Yeah,
to be a
absolutely.
GP, especially where you're kind of a general, right? You know a little bit about everything. But I wish there was a bit more neuroaffirmative teaching in our hospitals and systems. And I actually wonder, I don't know that much about the medical system and med school and that sort of thing, but I do wonder how many people with ADHD would like to work in that system but can't because accommodations aren't, um, or there isn't, what is the word, proper accommodations or accessibility. Because I would love to work with a neurodivergent doctor. That would be, I think, a really pleasant
Oh my
experience.
God, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many of us out there. I don't know if you heard, but even just in the state, I mean, maybe there's so many of us out there, but even in the States, there's an Adderall shortage since last year.
Mm.
So, I mean, that just tells you how many people are on it. Whether it's folks that should or shouldn't be on it, that just tells you something. We're having an issue either fundamentally, structurally, with our education systems and how students feel they need to apply themselves, and lots of people have ADHD and we need to, and just the system that we live in and work in isn't working
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah, no, I see that over and over. When I started counseling, like started my private practice, I saw a lot of UBC students, and a lot of the complaints were the same. You have these huge class sizes, no individualized care, and it's not the teacher's fault. The teachers are burnt out because there you have to teach a billion classes and
Yeah.
do research, and the students
Yeah.
really, when they do try to advocate, it's tricky. Like, how do you ensure equality in terms of testing when you have a class of 200 people who are all different and have diverse brains?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do you structure a system that's already in place? You can't just stop what's in motion. So, I mean, it's going to take time to start to adjust and realize that not every single person learns and is on the same schedule.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should make accommodations for people because I think that there is a lot of brilliant people and a lot of brilliant minds
Mhm.
that don't get to be recognized because of the system that we currently live in. And if they were given the appropriate accommodations, I'm not saying we need to make life easier for them. I'm saying that life is already hard. We should make way for people to be able to be their full selves and see where their education takes them and allow them to flourish. Why would we not want our society to flourish? Why would we want to stifle that?
Oh,
We should be
absolutely.
helping people.
Yeah, it makes me think of my when I did my master's degree, it was in art therapy, counseling psychology. So this, I thought it would be easier to do an art therapy degree, but it's actually like a double degree, much harder. But that's yeah, whatever.
Do more
Yeah.
work.
But what I loved about it is the teachers were so accommodating to my creative spirit. So I was allowed to create art during all of our lectures. It was encouraged. We even had like a class on creating cartoons in response to someone speaking. So instead of writing down what they're saying, creating a cartoon to represent it. There's all this all different types of learning, and specifically visual that
I love
oh,
that.
it was hard but fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's not like, drawing and incorporating art or different models and different modes of learning is easier. It's it's just adding a different element that other people can absorb and understand, a new way of looking at life. We appreciate art in the external world, but why not incorporate that with learning or therapy and, how can that help our brains comprehend and understand, or how can that deepen our perspective and our learning too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fabulous. And anytime you can, if you are a visual learner, not everybody is, but anytime you can incorporate that, it can really help you remember things. But it makes me think of what kind of learner are you, and how a big part of all of this, big piece of it, is understanding who you are so that you can eventually accept who you are, stop fighting who you are and what your brain needs, and give that to yourself.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And I think that for me personally, helping to understand who I am is unpacking a lifetime's worth of experiences and traumas and learning how my brain works. And that's also why I wanted to also get a diagnosis. I'm like, okay, if I have this, how can I learn, how does that help me learn more about myself? How can I be more forgiving? How can I be more understanding? How can I be more prepared so that I can operate in this world the way that society needs me to at times, but then also be kinder to myself and know that I am just as intelligent as the next and that I can do all of these things. I just make adjustments for myself and do it in a way that feels best. And I find that in a lot of ways, there is some accommodations that are being made
Mhm.
in certain settings. People are starting to understand and be more open to allowing people to learn and absorb in a way that works for them, because ultimately it benefits everybody. So, which also I wanted to ask you too, being an art therapist, how do you incorporate art into therapy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It can look like many different things. So, art in therapy is a little bit different than art as therapy. I always like to make that distinction. Art as therapy is considering the art as the healing element. So, if we were having a session of art as therapy, you might come over to my office and we would create art, and that would be the therapy itself. But art in therapy is maybe creating art together. Maybe there's a directive. Maybe you bring in art that you've already done and we look at it.
I love that.
It's great. I love it too. And it's a really vulnerable thing to do, to create art in front of your therapist.
I'm sure that you, in some ways, ask questions or maybe analyze it and see, what is this person creating and how does that relate to who they are as a person, what they're feeling, what that means to them. And yeah, you dive deep into questions, which relates back to what you were saying, being able to know yourself, which again, for me, therapy helped me better know myself,
Mm.
unpacking a lifetime of trauma, unpacking a lifetime of thoughts and feelings, and why, asking those questions why. So now I can go out in the world and I have a better understanding of who I am. and we're going to continue learning. I mean, we continue to evolve throughout our lifetime. So therapy is a great place to start if you want to get to know yourself better. And it's not just about dealing with one problem. You might go in for one problem and then, discover that there's so many other things that therapy can help with. It's not just about problems. Like, I've found that some of my best days with my therapist are the times where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about today. I feel great. I don't really have anything to unpack or discover. And then we end up talking for an hour, and the things that come out, I'm just like, I'm so surprised. It's just the questions, because people don't ask you questions about yourself like that.
Yeah.
And it can be really embarrassing, and it takes time for you to really want to be open and really admit to a lot of the things that you've experienced or some of the things that we've done that we may not be proud of, and really work through that. But ultimately, it really helps you, when you know yourself, to be a better person in the world, in society, to your family, to your friends. So there's great benefits in that. And so I love it. I always highly recommend therapy.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think I really am of the mindset that when you go to therapy, you're not just affecting yourself, like you said, you're affecting your whole world, right? Every way you interact with your world is different. And
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about art therapy is that with that visual, what you created, and I will just make a disclaimer: art therapists don't analyze your art. We ask you questions so that you
Okay.
can start to amplify and understand your art.
That's better.
Yeah.
I'd be so nervous going in and you're looking at my art and you're like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually like, I'm imagining like the ink blobs,
Yeah.
and you're like, what do you see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Classic. Yeah, but what is really beautiful is when we come to these, or even if we don't ask any questions about the art, even if the art is just there and present, at the end of the session, you have something to take home, and you're like, you can look back months later and be like, I remember that session. Wow, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, you have something physical and tangible to look back at and remember. And also, again, for a person with ADHD, sitting still for an hour, sometimes I can do it again. I obviously never shut up. I still haven't. But you get an opportunity to do something while you're communicating. And I think that there's almost like you're getting in your body. You're not just speaking from your head.
Mhm.
You're getting in your body. You're working through art. You're sort of incorporating different parts of yourself while you're going through the therapy session. So I find that really interesting and intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on there. And what I find really interesting is when, a client has a creative maybe accident happen where the pen goes off the paper, or they meant to choose this color, but they accidentally did that color. And in that moment, we get to really see like what happens in their psyche: frustration, anxiety,
Right.
embarrassment. We get to work with it right there. It's very
Exactly.
powerful.
Yeah, you get to see how people sort of operate in the world and start to work through that. And I can imagine too, like if people have like, stuck energy in their body, if you're physically moving and you're working while you're in therapy, that could bring up more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do incorporate a lot of somatic work into therapy, specifically for emotional regulation and just getting that nervous system centered. I'm not a somatic practitioner, but I did uh, quite a bit of time with a somatic supervisor. Just in case people don't know, therapists are often encouraged and sometimes have to pay another therapist to consult with to get certain licenses and certain registrations. So I did that for a year to get my art therapy registration. And the art therapist I worked with was also a somatic practitioner. And wow, I learned so much. It was just incredible.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah. So that's something I really advocate for, especially for people who connect with the ADHD label, because often and I don't want to generalize, but there's a tendency to be a bit more sensitive to things. So being on the sensitive
Yes.
podcast, maybe you can relate.
Yes, being on the hypersensitive. Absolutely. I think that's probably initially also where it stems from. I think that there is also, I know that, I don't think that, I know that there's reasons, trauma, experiences, and also having ADHD that has made me a sensitive person. And working through therapy has allowed me to know that there's lots of sensitive people out there, which is why I wanted to make this podcast. I wanted to just talk about sensitive subjects, but also just be in my feelings. I'm like, there's got to be, if I have all these feelings, there's got to be a way that I can use this and be of service in some way while working with what I'm experiencing inside. And so instead of it being something that I struggle with, I just want to be open about it now, because a lot of the time I would just feel things, and people may have not known that I was a sensitive person, extremely sensitive person, but I would just hold on to it and just bury it and bury it and bury it deep. And then I started to think that, like, do I even have feelings sometimes? So it could go both ways. There is something called, is it rejection dysphoria associated with ADHD? What is that exactly? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria,
Okay.
where, yeah, and many, I think all my clients probably can relate to that particular label. Basically, just
Yeah.
being very, very hypersensitive to rejection. And even I think projecting it onto people and places where it doesn't exist, prepping yourself for that,
Yes.
being scared to do things because of rejection. It can really lead to a lot of people pleasing, which is part of this kind of,
Yes.
you know what, I think if we really look at the true neuroses that is ADHD, it's not ADHD. It's not that the brain is wrong and broken and needs to be fixed. It's that the neurosis is masking, right? That our world forces us to mask and to pretend to not be ourselves in order to live and survive in this society, which causes
Yes.
anxiety, depression, hypersensitivity, right? Always checking in.
Totally.
It's exhausting, really exhausting for people.
Absolutely. Just trying to have people trust you. I mean, that sounds weird, but I just
Yeah.
mean in the sense that when you're, some of the symptoms of ADHD can be forgetfulness, which I know I struggle with. I'm only speaking from my own perspective, my own experiences and symptoms. Forgetfulness, troubles with timings, running late. Also, I so feel the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and the people pleasing. I mean, oh my God, the years that I have spent working to make sure that people like me enough so that I don't have to have any rejection or hear anything
Yeah.
negative. It's like I already have so much negative. I'm already thinking that I'm not good enough. I'm already thinking that I'm terrible at this. I don't need somebody to confirm that. And at times we do. We do need constructive criticism in order to move ahead. There are people who are here to help you. And so being able to hear what they have to say in order to help you move forward is really important. And it's how do you accept that information without it hurting you, without you letting it hurt you too much so that you can't move forward. And then it continues this cycle of I'm not good enough, I can't move forward, I'm stuck, because you don't allow yourself to be open enough to necessarily hear what people who care for you want to say to you, because it hurts. What is your experience with that and some of your clients?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. I think a lot of my clients would really resonate with that, and I do. I really resonate with that feeling. It's a tricky thing to handle, right? We've got these two kind of things we balance with this kind of brain, which is often people telling you you're too much, or often people telling you you're not enough. So if you're always looking
Yes.
out for that, am I being too much? Am I not enough? Am I being too much? Am I not enough? You're just like constantly on the go. Your brain already is spinning, and you start out with like a lack of like to say most people start out with like this much executive function in a day, and somebody who connects with the label ADHD usually starts out with like this much. So to be very careful where that precious executive function goes, and often it's going into these masking skills of okay, I'm not too much in this situation, perfect, and then reflecting later, was I too much? Like your whole day becomes this like whole script kind of and rehearsing, and oh, it's bizarre.
Yes. Absolutely. It is so bizarre. Just trying to fit in the society, and also, not having people be mad at you. There's like this idea that like people giving you feedback, or because of your symptoms you're screwing up, and people are going to ultimately be mad at you. Your friends are going to be mad at you for being late, your family, your work is going to be upset with you. So there's always this your back is up because you're like, okay, somebody's going to be mad at me for something today because I've screwed up again, or I'm not good enough. All of these thoughts and feelings that come up. And then so you try to mask them. You're like, okay, I need people to think I'm professional, know I'm professional, know I'm smart, know I'm neurotypical, know that I can do all the things that everybody else can. I need them to believe in me. So I'm going to think, act, talk, walk, and experience life in the way that everybody else seems to be doing. I'm going to do what they do. And then hopefully I'll just blend in. And then people just think, I'm just going to go under the
Yeah.
radar.
And then you'll feel like an
I'm not going to
imposter.
get called out for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have all these other things that start to come up for you. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, exactly. Now I'm an imposter. And now I have all this shit that I'm going to have to work on later.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's frustrating. Though I think parents are catching on, like and I want to blame parents at all, but I think the paradigm back in the day was try harder and you'll get it done. We had posters like this in my school, maybe you did too. Like, if you try hard enough, you can reach the moon, or, basically just advocating that if you don't try hard, if you don't get where you want to go, it's because you're not trying hard enough. And that was
Right.
ingrained into, I think, parents as well. So instead of looking for,
That you're lazy and that you're not, you're not showing up and
yeah,
you don't want to do it.
and it's an ableist response. So instead of talking to the child, or maybe the adult too, you can think of this in a relationship and saying, say your partner, like, I don't know, leaves the milk out all the time. Like, what is it that you need right now? Okay, first of all, when you do that, it's really frustrating. But what is it that
Yes.
you need right now, so that you can remember? Like, what can we find a solution? Can we work together, us against the problem, not you are the problem? Which is a very different way of thinking about, your kid or your spouse.
How do you, for those at home who have somebody that they love and somebody in their life that has ADHD, how do you be more kind and thoughtful to how they show up in the world? How can we be more accepting? How can we assist with them and not always get mad at them? But then also, I'm a big person to take responsibility for my life as well. Knowing that I have this, there's a lot of extra preparation that I have to do, and it is more work. But that's just the way society runs. So in order to maintain my relationships and maintain working life, there are things that I need to do and be prepared for. So I take responsibility for that. But how do those people in our life that love us, how can they be more understanding and thoughtful?
Yeah, and this is such a great question. And I worked with couples back when I did couples therapy rather, relationship therapy, because not all relationships are couples. On this kind of
Yes.
thing, and in my own relationship too, it can be tricky. My partner has ADHD, so it feels sometimes like an ADHD battle. Like,
Yeah. Everybody's got
right?
ADHD in the house.
But
Now what? Who's putting the milk out in the fridge
who's
and
putting it in the
what does that look
freezer
like?
and like, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
Who's got in the
yeah.
cupboard?
But so I think it's just really trying to be compassionate and to again keep that mindset of it's not like your spouse or your person isn't trying to do this maliciously. Like, it's not like they left the milk out and we're like, ha 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 ha. Like, now you're going to be mad all day
Totally.
because I left the milk out. He he he. Like, it was an accident. And if it happens again and again, it's frustrating. And spouses and partners can start to feel like their parents. So, really, it's about finding skills that help that person. Of course, I recommend therapy for everybody, but and
Yeah.
relationship counseling can be really helpful. Reading some books, there's some really great books about loving somebody who has ADHD. I think is a Russell. I don't know if it's a Russell Barkley book. It might be. But have some good, just classic tips. But I would really truly say, sitting down, talking with your partner, how can we work together to find a solution, so that it's not you giving them the solution. They have to work for it too, right? But it's not you blaming them either. And I want to say that I think we could all do this with ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Not being too hard on ourselves, not blaming ourselves. And even though things come up and it gets frustrating at times, I get so frustrated with myself. Being understanding with ourselves and being kind is the quickest way to have a bounce back. Otherwise, it's, oh my God, if I am too hard on myself, that's going to cause a domino effect in everything I do in my life. And then it's like, okay, now I'm stressed. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm punishing myself. And that's not helpful to me or anybody else around me. That's going to make life very miserable. So, yeah, it's just taking responsibility and being kind, picking yourself back up from where you left off, and finding systems that work for you, that don't feel like they're going to be too laborious in your life, and it's not going to take up too much time, but it's also going to help prepare you and keep you on track. I mean, I have a day planner that I have to, like, immediately, if I have an appointment, and I don't always do this, like, I sound super organized, and I have to be to a degree, but I have to write things down where I'm going to forget. And I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts that come in. So it's like, even though I think I'm going to remember it in the moment, I'm like, no, this is fresh. Like, I'm going to remember this. I won't. I'm going to divert my attention somewhere else, somewhere else, somewhere else. And then it's going to get lost in the mix. So I literally make a checklist. And the thing that I like about checklists is just that I can literally check off everything that I've done in my day. Not only does it help me remember what is important and what needs to get done, but it feels good to just like cross all that off and be like, okay, I did all this shit today. No, I'm not necessarily pushing everybody to be like overwork yourself or, hustle culture, even though I've been guilty of being included in hustle culture. I'm not necessarily thinking that it's bad, but you really need time to rest too. And sometimes I'll even put things that allow me to rest in my to-do list. And like once I've completed that, I just check it
It's
off.
so important.
And then I can start to keep track.
Yeah, I think that's so great, Chrissy. So many people don't do that. And that's like a huge, huge thing. Not just having work in your agenda, but also having play and pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. So important to incorporate. Just give yourself a rest and give yourself time to do the things that you enjoy, because sometimes living in the world when it doesn't work for your brain, you want to do things that feel good and work for your brain. And so I need sometimes hours to do that. So rest is important, to take the time to do the things that you enjoy and fill your soul, make you happy, because very quickly that could turn into anxiety or depression or something else. So
Yeah. And I think on that note, like knowing who you are, again, this is that part of psychotherapy and maybe a bit more Jungian, which is bringing the unconscious into conscious awareness, is really getting to know yourself. So, are you somebody that actually thrives on that kind of boom and bust cycle? Because some people do, and we villainize it all the time, but some people love working a ton, resting, working a ton, resting. So finding a career that fits that.
yeah.
Paramedics, for instance, some people who connect with the ADHD label feel most alive when they're in the moment and like the dopamine's rushing in and they just have to be there. And so make that work for you in your life. I have a story and it's not mine. I don't remember where I got it from, whether it was a
I'd love
client
to hear
or
it.
another therapist. I don't think a client, but yeah, so I there was this story somebody told me about somebody who was connected to the label of ADHD, was diagnosed with this, was taking medication, and decided that they wanted to do something that was just in alignment with their brain. And so they went and they bought a farm. I know we can't all buy farms. Like we're not
Oh
That's
my
a lot of
God.
privilege, but I think it was like out in the boonies. It was a very cheap kind of place and just started farming and they felt like they didn't need medication anymore because this was what like this hands-on activity really allowed them and just having this space really allowed them to just be in touch with nature and themselves and it worked for them, you know?
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That is so brilliant, because there's also, I mean, this isn't just, feeling based. This is, it's dopamine that we are lacking, right? It has to do with the reward system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what the medical model would say, and yes, that's hence why stimulants are effective.
Right. So, I mean, it goes back to finding things that you enjoy applying yourself to, because we could spend hours focused, hyper focused on things that we really enjoy. And it might be multiple different things, but sometimes I just get into a headspace where I'm doing something I love, whether that's like doing some editing or research or reading, and it's like I'm doing that for hours. So it's like, well, why can't I apply myself when I'm doing something specific at work? I get paralysis. I can't even get started on it. But this, I can like pour so many hours of time and love and just be in
Yeah.
it. So it's not a ADHD attention deficit. Is I don't have a deficit of attention. I have a lot of attention, but of course for the things that I love. And then it's trying to wrangle that attention and put it into the things that need to get done. But then also giving myself time to do the things that I really like. And I find that that helps keep me feeling really good.
I love that. And again, appreciate all of the work you've done on your own self-awareness and knowing what you and your brain need. I like the analogy of kind of like riding a horse. And it's not a surprise to anyone who's listening to this who knows me. I like to involve horses in analogies. But
Yes.
I think, your brain is like a horse. And so you can put all this harsh tack on it and force it to do what you want. But that horse is going to get more and more either dull or agitated and not feel safe. Right? So the better, maybe I think, approach to that would be to try and work with it so that you can both go where you need to go. So, Chrissy wants to do this in her career and her horse brain doesn't want to. But can you make a compromise, right? Where
Yes.
you're working together, you get there more efficiently, everyone's more relaxed, everyone's happier, rather than just forcing it because we force our brains to do so much. But I think for most things, there's a workaround. There's a way to work with your brain, kind of gamify it a little bit. It takes some
Totally.
time, but do you have any thoughts? Like, how do you gamify your brain?
How do I gamify it? Honestly, I think that it's like the quote, like there's only one way to eat an elephant and it's one bite at a time. And so I need to sometimes it's music
Mm,
to get me in the mood to do something that I don't necessarily want to do. I'm like, I need to feel like a bad bitch right now. So I need to like put on some music. I need to take breaks. That's another thing too. Sometimes I'm doing something that I have to focus on. And if I notice that my focus is waning or if I haven't eaten, I'm like, okay, go take a break. Go take like 10 minutes and just go get a snack, go shake it out. I can even just like pop my AirPods in and just listen to something. Just do something I like for like 10 minutes, boost myself up to get back into doing something that isn't so desirable. We all have to do undesirable things at times, but there are ways to sort of increase your excitement. That may not be for that specific task, but I just get myself in a good mood and get myself out. Like I just kind of like to wash that all away, and then get started again. So yeah, it's like taking little breaks, get a snack, shake it out, do the things I like, listen to a good song. Music is like really important in my life to helping me base myself where I'm at. So
yeah, no, I think music is incredible. Right. Just if you have that happy playlist that just gets you pumped, or I often listen to meditation music in the background, just
yeah,
something there, because it can be hard to have nothing there for a lot of people.
yeah, absolutely. You're just going at a task in like a room with like really shitty lighting and this beige box. It can be tough. So yeah, just getting yourself excited again about what you're doing, or at least feeling excitement in your body can help you apply yourself.
Yeah, I really like that. I like what you said about excitement in the body because often your brain is looking for reasons why you feel a particular way, which is why if you feel anxious, you might notice your brain is saying like, "Oh, why okay, why do I feel anxious? What happened today?" And it's looking for reasons. So I often tell my clients, like, "Yes, we'll look for those too, but don't always believe your brain." Like
Yeah,
the story
absolutely.
isn't always
Yeah, don't
true.
always believe what you're saying. Yeah, don't always believe what you think.
Exactly, but it works the other way around too. So if you're in the middle of feeling really panicked and you can get your body relaxing, your brain will too. And if you're in the middle of feeling really tired, if you get your body moving, you can often trick your brain into getting moving too. So that's really
Yeah,
wise. Yeah.
absolutely. And again, it's like that hyper focus thing too. Like I'll once I get into it, once I get into a mode, I will not go to the bathroom. I will not eat. I will be so into what I'm doing that I'm like, okay, in 5 minutes, I'm taking a break. So finish what you can in this 5 minutes. And then I don't care, you need to get up and just move your body.
Yeah.
And then immediately, like
Yeah.
stretch, like just take a few minutes. Life isn't about just sitting in a chair or sitting in a desk or going at one thing for 8 hours. Just make sure you take little breaks for yourself. And I find that so helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
You have a Jungian approach to your work. Can you explain what that entails? I'm so interested and
Yeah,
intrigued.
absolutely. Not an easy question to answer, but it's just basically I base how I work with clients off of the work of Carl Jung. So he is most people know Jung for these kind of pop psychology things like the shadow, which is actually a very in-depth and non-pop psychology element of Jungian's
Shadow
psychology.
work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear that a
Yeah,
lot.
archetypes and the collective unconscious are all attributed to him. So, working with from his kind of perspective, or from his theory at least, I take what I can. I also bring other things into it, but I find it can be really helpful because we're looking at, integrating the unconscious into the conscious. So, really exploring those territories, the the things that you don't know are happening but are happening and that are influencing your behavior and your being in the world. It's a very profound and meaningful work, and not all of my clients will engage fully in that work. Sometimes we'll do more CBT style or more somatic work, using lots of imagination. But when we are kind of heavy into the Jungian work, it's long term. It's, looking at dreams, images, all of that
Amazing.
fun stuff, fairy tales. But I do want to say I'm not a Jungian analyst. So there are different degrees of, I practice from a Jungian theory and I've done my own analysis and I've, you know, read many books and taken many courses. But to be an analyst, a Jungian analyst who does Jungian analysis, means you've been to analyst training, which is the equivalent, if not more, of a PhD. So 5 years minimum, usually.
So there's a lot that's involved in this work that, even you could continue going on and on for. So it just, all of the work that you have to do, therapy isn't overnight. I'm sure it can be if you want to go in for something specific, but to really, like we said, get to know yourself and to really work through a lot of what you experience and how you view the world, it takes time and it takes work and it takes effort. And it takes time to build a bond with your therapist. In my experience, it's not easy talking to somebody that you don't know about everything that you've done in your life or everything you've experienced, because everybody has some form, I'm sure, of trauma, whether that be yours or even intergenerational,
Mhm.
which I've read a book. I was reading a book about, I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to link it in the description, but it's called It Doesn't Start With You. And actually, I think my therapist actually gave it to me, but it was really interesting about, how our trauma and us not doing the work, it wasn't a conversation that people were having. Like going to therapy was like, even when I talk to my parents about going to therapy, they're like, no way am I going to spill my life to a stranger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just wasn't the conversation. There's a lot of stigma around it. But us starting with it, getting to know ourselves, I'm not saying that we're going to be perfect because there's no way to be perfect, but to at least give yourself the chance can help everybody else around you, can help your children, it can help people in the future have a lot less to
Yeah.
unpack, hopefully, if you get started on that. But yeah, intergenerational trauma is a really interesting topic too, that we are unpacking things that are not even our own, like things that have just been passed on in our cells. How do you feel about intergenerational trauma?
Oh, I think it's huge. And I think it's really courageous, the people that are doing the work. Um, it's there's so many elements here, like different, and I don't know as much about the science perspective as maybe I could, but different gene elements even that get turned on from what I've heard, from trauma and are passed down. And even you look at sometimes if somebody's been through a big event, like there'll be some very interesting research on COVID, I'm sure. People who were pregnant during this time and how that stress, that pregnancy and
Right.
COVID actually affected the fetus at that time. So there's a kind of genetic and biological component, but there's also how we are raised. So, when somebody has experienced trauma and not dealt with it, oh, I don't like that word dealt, but they haven't explored it and worked with it and integrated it. They're going to pass it on to their kids. And, Young once said something along the lines of the unlived life of the parent always gets passed down to the child. So whether that be I never became a rock star, and so therefore you have to do it for me. Or I
Yeah.
never got to have a safe childhood, and therefore you have to have the safest childhood ever. And I'm going to be like helicoptering. I'm not going to let you out of my sight.
Right.
So everything affects everything when it comes to trauma.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I should say too, the nervous system. If you have a parent who's traumatized, their nervous system is usually in a constant state of arousal, which means, and our bodies interact with other bodies. If we were sitting together right now and you were
Exactly.
anxious, I would feel it, vice versa. Like that child picks up on that, and that's their
Yes.
comfortable state of being is anxiety.
Exactly. Absolutely. Like you can feel when somebody is going through something if if you're in a room with them, and having that be your experience, your rhythm of life growing up, that does something to you. That does something to your
Yeah,
body. I'm sure there's families out there too that don't talk about things, but they're feeling all of those
yeah.
things. And if you don't open up and talk with your family, friends, or loved ones, it's like all of this feeling that's inside of you doesn't just go away. People can feel that, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and they're picking up on that.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's not safe to talk to your family. Sometimes the abuse is coming from your family, right? Like there's
Exactly.
so much, yeah, there's so many involved factors. It's a very complex thing, trauma.
It is extremely complex, which is why it can take time, and it's probably a good idea to see a therapist if you can. Or, it's just tough. You can talk to your friends and family about so much. Maybe you can't talk to your family. Maybe you don't feel like you have an outlet. But there is just something to say about somebody who has a perspective on you that is completely like a clean slate and isn't going to judge
Yeah.
you and is there with helpful questions. And those questions, it's often not people like what doesn't help you isn't necessarily people pushing advice onto you. It's asking you questions that lead you to the answer that's best for you.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just witnessing, being witnessed, telling your story. A
Yeah.
therapist can really take in that story and actually hold it, kind of if we think symbolically, the therapist is like a vessel. They can hold your story, keep it safe, and let it transform, slowly but surely into something new, maybe something that you can be at peace with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm a huge proponent for therapy if I haven't said a million times in this
That's
podcast.
awesome.
I'm not being I'm not being paid by a therapist or anything like that. I was so apprehensive about going in the beginning, and so I just can't say enough that it's been so helpful. And yeah, it's just like I was talking about with the medication. It can be a trial and error to find somebody that jives with you.
Totally.
You don't have to go to like therapy and be like, that didn't really feel I didn't love that experience. And you don't have to stick with that person. It just might be not your person. You don't have to be like, oh, is this what therapy is like? It's like, okay, well, therapy should also feel kind of good, the person that you're talking to.
And there's so many different types of therapy out there that people don't know about. There's art therapy,
Exactly.
music therapy, somatic, which is body therapy, like just all sorts of fun things out there. So I love that. If yeah, I really want to emphasize that, if you feel like you had a session that didn't feel right or you didn't really jive with your therapist, like don't give up. Keep searching. You'll find your person.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for today. This was an excellent chat with you today. I wanted to also mention that you have a online course that is going to be coming out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So anybody who's interested, it's a self-awareness course. So guided 5-week program where you go through, it's called My Fairy Tale Adventure. So you go through kind of your own personal fairy tale. You leave the castle, you go into the forest, and you do a bit of dream exploration, a lot of journaling. So if you're into that kind of thing, art activities. You can do it yourself or with friends, but I think it's going to be fun. A lot of the things that I've learned help people understand themselves a little bit better. I've tried to incorporate into this course. So
That's incredible. I love that so much. Once it's out, if it is out by the time this episode is released, I will link it in the description. Otherwise, I'll make sure everybody's aware when it comes
oh, thank
out.
you.
Where you're welcome. Where can people find
Oh,
you?
yes. You can find me. My website is creativeconnectiontherapy.ca. Um, so on Psychology Today and Instagram at, oh, what is my Instagram? Oh my gosh. Go to my website. It's all on my website.
Awesome. And I'll link her website below in the description as well. Absolutely amazing having you. Adore you. Thank you so much. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Perfect. Bye, Chrissy.